Hello everyone, welcome to the next episode of Daddy Chats. And here with me, would you like to introduce yourself?
I did not know that's what the show was called.
I probably should have told
talking
you
for half an hour. You could have warned me. Jeez.
Oh no, I wanted to see your pure shock. This is the absolute mess. Go on, introduce yourself.
Oh my god. I'm Aidan Mattis. I'm the host of the Lore Lodge. Apparently I'm the newest guest on Daddy Chat. It's okay. I get called Lore Daddy, so I know how it is.
Yeah, that it's just because. Well, I think Wendusi is your biggest. How did the Wendusi thing start? Actually, I don't even have it on the list, but I'm asking you. How did the Wendusi stuff start?
It was. I cannot take credit for coining the term itself, but it was one of my followers. So I mean, this is kind of the story I tell everybody when they ask, but I was 3 days from my last day at my job that I worked out of college. I decided I was going to grad school. I applied.
Your camera's flopping. I just realized your camera's like moving up and down.
It must be my foot touching the desk.
Sorry.
It's up on the monitor. You're fine. Sorry about that.
That's right.
But yeah, so I had put in my 2 weeks. I had put my down payment in on a house or an apartment over in, I guess, a flat over in the UK.
Yeah.
And I was getting ready to go, and I just, I didn't have anything left on my plate. It was a Friday. My last day was the next Tuesday. I was sitting around on TikTok, and I saw a video that said, "What's a conspiracy you can't prove but 100% believe in?" I said the national parks were created to hide the Wendigo. That blew up because the Skinwalker Ranch thing was huge on Netflix on Hulu at the time. That kind of just exploded, and I started talking about the Wendigo a lot because it's my favorite mythological, folklore monster.
Yeah,
and people just loved it, and it kind of became a running joke. And then sometime that summer, one of my followers made a video where it said something about getting the Wendusi. And of course, a lot of my early followers caught on to my political opinions and knew that I was more like classical liberal, libertarian right type. And I don't talk about politics at all on TikTok or YouTube. I'll occasionally make like a veiled statement that's, you shouldn't trust the government, but that's about it. But this guy, his user was a Blackbeard Actual, and it was like full like big igloo kit, like the Hawaiian shirt, the night vision goggles, all of it. And it was just a video, and it was a couple of Wojaks. It was like, when I go into the woods to get that Wendusi, it's like my mind is telling me no, but my body is telling me yes.
No, I've actually seen that video. I didn't know that was the original.
That was the original Wendusi video. And I just because from the very beginning when I started talking about it, I had people who were like, "I'm going to suplex the Wendigo." And I was like, "You shouldn't do that." Yes, and then people started to say, I'm going to fuck the Wendigo. And I was like, "You really shouldn't do that." And then they came up with Wendusi, and at that point I was like, all right, I've lost control completely. And now I see people who make Wendusi jokes on Instagram and TikTok who don't follow me.
Yeah. Oh, it's
like if it's just an Ussy joke, okay, that might not be my fault. I see people who don't follow me posting Wendusi jokes, and I'm like, oh, I've lost control.
I saw the Ussy joke before I saw the Wendusi joke before I saw the other Ussies. Like this is really weird. If you took this out of context, this is really weird.
It's very strange. But it was,
Yeah, you've definitely had a cultural impact. I mean, it did start coming over because obviously we do have a little bit of crossover in viewership, and I noticed that I now get Alexander the Griossi or Alex Ussi, and they're like you're so damn bad for the Alex. But yeah, no, it's that I managed to step that out because I was like, no, I'm just ignoring you. I'm not allowing this to flourish.
I kind of, at first, I definitely resisted it. And then there came a point where I was like, I'm just going to lean into it and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And I think the first video where I finally went along with it was when people were using that one sound that was basically the dun 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 dun, just one of those really intense ones. I can't remember exactly what it was, but talking about going to get something or finding something or whatever. And I kitted up. I've got my great grandfather's World War I helmet right here.
Love it.
so I popped that on, popped on some of my tactical gear, and made a video sitting there with like my this wooden tomahawk that I carved when I was a kid, and just like made a video like that where I was like, we're going to get the Windussi, and people just cheered. Like, they were all for it. I did a good soup one about Wendigo milk at one point.
Oh no, I haven't seen. Yeah. That's a weird one. Do Wendigos produce milk? Actually, see, we are going to do some form of sensible talk on this part. This is what happened in the last one when I had them Candagelus on. He was meant to talk, or both meant to talk about the Soviet Union, and it ended up talking about dragons and unicorns.
It's hard to keep these things on track.
Yeah, but, that's the best part of them. I think it's just that you can physically track how a conversation derails.
Yeah. And that's why we started up the second show that we have on Saturdays now, is so that we could have a show where we just like drink and shoot the shit and then be more focused the next day. Because otherwise we just couldn't keep ourselves on track. But yeah, we have things to talk about. What are they?
Yes, right. Anyways, the most important one is I've now knocked it. Wait, I had the sheet up. This is how prepared I am. I'm professional. You've definitely got the presenting like any sort of podcast thing much better than I have. I'm so unprofessional.
Okay, to be fair, we're on. I think we're on episode 43 tomorrow, so we've had some time.
Yeah, I'm on episode 2.
If you go back and you look at our early ones, you can't even find how bad they were at first because we've edited them. Because the technical difficulties and everything were so bad, you'd have 8 minutes of us just struggling to figure something out.
See, I've got. I tried to leave these unedited as possible. I mean, in the English one, he got the Roman Empire and the Mongol Empire time periods confused, and I've still refused to edit it out. He's been asking me to edit it out, and I'm like, no, I got the bit about Magnetars wrong. But anyways, Æthelflæd.
Yes.
I haven't finished The Last Kingdom, but I was actually quite annoyed. I got to episode 2. You finished it, haven't you?
I think I'm through episode 9. I started watching 10 yesterday. I realized I must have fallen asleep during episode 10, and because I was like, I can't remember how the show ended. And then I went back and started watching, and I was like, oh, I don't remember this bit.
See, I have that with episodes of Rick and Morty. There's whole episodes of Rick and Morty I'm didn't know existed because I'd fallen asleep watching them because they're half an hour long. They just disappear. But I don't really watch Rick and Morty anymore. It got a bit stale. But so I was really annoyed. Obviously, they went with, I'm assuming, breast cancer from the symptoms they were presenting.
That does appear to be what it was. Yeah.
But possible
spoilers ahead, by the way.
Oh yeah. I probably should have said that.
Seen up through.
Yeah. Just skip. I'll put a marker when we stop talking about
it is a historical drama, people obviously die.
Yeah.
But,
just
be aware.
Fair,
yeah.
If you've read any history book ever, you've sort of spoiled the show.
Yeah.
But what annoyed me is Æthelflæd, from what I obviously you know this a bit better than me, but Æthelflæd was dead by the first time Æthelflæd is properly mentioned, and she's still alive at this point in the show. And
so
go on.
Yeah. And this is common with historical dramas. There's often... So if you watch the first season of The Last Kingdom, I don't think there was any intention for Elswith. I don't think there was any intention for her to outlive Alfred's, time period.
No.
Because I think she did outlive Alfred, if I remember correctly, but I don't think by very much.
Yeah, just barely.
Which is not, that's not surprising. So by the time that Æthelflæd is, coming into her own as an adult, Elswith definitely would not have been alive, but she became such a useful character during the show that you have to think from a script writing perspective, you have to keep that character in there because other than Elswith, if you look at the show, who is left from season 1 by season 5? Uhtred and maybe Finan. I think Finan's in season 1.
Finan's comes in about season 3 because it's season 2.
It's after Uhtred's enslaved. He meets Finan.
Yeah, which is rough midway through season 2, start of season 3.
To be fair, I read the books before I saw the show, so I might be drawing from the books here a little bit. I can't totally remember the books, by the way, if you have not read them.
I will read them. I'm just getting back into reading. I don't know if you can see the Witcher selection there. I've just started reading The Witcher, which was my reintroduction. Because everyone was like, the books are beat the show by a mile. And I was like, this is a different storyline. This isn't the show.
Yeah, they definitely took like the overarching storyline of the books and the characters and built the show around them. If you were to do each of those books, you could make a season of TV out of each book. So there was just no way. Even where we are now in the show, the books go past that. Like Uhtred is alive to like see Æthelstan do stuff. So it's
really,
yeah.
How old is Uhtred? Is Uhtred immortal? Because even in the show, I'm like, he looks like he's 35, and he must be about 70 at this point.
Yeah, so I can actually I'll look up the exact date of his life. Æthelstan was coronated on the 4th of September 925.
See, that's interesting because the show
only ruled briefly though.
Æthelstan had a decent rule because he finished off Æthelflæd's conquest. Because where I've been reading was because everyone goes, oh, it was because Æthelflæd was a woman they put her story down, and in reality it was because she was ruling in Mercia, and they really wanted Wessex to be Wessex, and Wessex founded England. But when I was looking at I think his name was Michael Wood. I was watching a lecture from him. Mm-hmm. And when he got up the Irish and Welsh chronicles, Æthelflæd was referred to as the Queen of the Anglo-Saxons. It wasn't. They didn't mention Edward or Æthelstan. That it was like everything was Æthelflæd did this and Æthelflæd did that. Which is, and if you look at it, the founder of England wasn't so much Edward. He was following Æthelflæd's lead. Really.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Like the title of Forgotten Founder of England, I think fits her perfectly.
And to just speak in terms of Æthelflæd for a second here, like the show Vikings totally just does not include her enough. I don't know if
I'm only on midway through season 1 of Vikings. I never really got into it.
She is nowhere near as influential a charter as she is in The Last Kingdom, which is why for me when I look at the two shows, I think that Vikings in terms of displaying Norse culture. At the time, does a much better job, but they totally whiff on Anglo-Saxon. So it's because they have to make the Anglo-Saxons the bad guys, which is kind of hard to do when the show is about the Vikings invading the Anglo-Saxons.
That's what annoyed me with Valhalla, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I was like, because Alfred, great. Anyone in the UK who is a history buff, like they have their set English heroes the same as the Welsh and the Scottish and the Irish all have. Alfred the Great is pinned so high. The only person I've ever seen him combat with, and this is going to be very divisive, Mike, because if you mention him, you get people love him, get people hate him. Winston Churchill is the only person.
I was worried you were going to say Oliver Cromwell for a second, and I was like, oh boy, we cannot continue this show.
No. We can't do. I still get.
There are some Cromwell stands out there.
Yeah, I still get hate. In fact, I get hate from two groups of people on my Cromwell video on YouTube. People who said that I didn't go hard enough on Cromwell when I called him a literal genocidal maniac in that video. And I have people who are like, but don't you know he did all this good stuff? And it always starts with, you didn't include this. And I'm like, and they include, because everyone was obsessed with, we have to talk about how he actually originally wanted religious freedoms and it was his followers who corrupted his plan. And I'm like, he only rejected being a king because he was worried about perception. Like, if you actually read his diary and his memoirs, he had the power of a king. He lived in the king's house, but he only ate bread because he was modest. I'm like, if I moved to the White House tomorrow and I didn't become the president, right, and I only ate bread, but I still told everyone what to do.
Well, if you, looking back at American history, like, you can see obvious parallels. Like, Washington was thinking about Cromwell. When the U.S. was forming. Because he very deliberately was like, no, I do not want to be a king. I don't want the power of a king. I don't want you to call me a king. I don't even want this position in society. Because he was the general who won the Revolutionary War, and they were ready to put a crown on his head.
Yeah.
And that man was looking back at Cromwell going, I don't want that to be my legacy.
America would have lasted 5 minutes if he had taken the crown. If he had taken the crown and he had done, it would have immediately splintered, because everyone would be like, what did we fight for? It's the same thing that Cromwell's troops were arguing.
One of my favorite bits from American history is that the Declaration of Independence is formally signed on August 2nd, 1776.
Yeah.
By September, Delaware declared independence from Pennsylvania. And what was Pennsylvania going to say?
Yeah.
The Declaration of Independence was just signed in our capital city. What are we going to say to Delaware?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we can declare independence from England, but you can't declare independence from us. Like, no, so we had to go with it.
My favourite thing, I mean, to be fair, it's still history. We can derail onto this, because I don't know much about American history. What I do know is because I have a real soft spot for Texas, because it is... because they got independence from Mexico and then just went straight to America. Like
that was by choice.
Yeah. But that's why I find it interesting, because they didn't. If it had been forced on them, I'd find it less. But the humor is like, we're independent, not anymore. Like but I can understand why they did it. Obviously, it was a majority Anglo, group in Texas. But I think Texas has I'm going to upset so many people. But what I'm about to say, it has the most interesting history of any state, coming from someone who doesn't know that much American history.
It's definitely up there.
Yeah.
I don't think you can really, other than maybe Texas and California, I don't think there's really competition with the original 13 colonies.
Yeah.
Just because so much happened, especially between New York and Georgia. There's so much that has happened. But yeah, we're pretty off topic.
Oh yeah, no, we've gone from Anglo-Saxon
back to Æthelflæd.
Yeah, from Anglo-Saxon England to Texas. It's okay. We'll make our way to unicorns at some point. Where was I?
We're talking about Æthelflæd.
How she was more influential in Vikings than she was in Last Kingdom. I haven't seen Vikings purely, but all I see now on YouTube is I don't know if you've ever watched Scalagram. I can't pronounce his name.
I've seen a couple of his videos.
Yeah, he did like a 2-hour-long video just rinsing the authenticity of Vikings, and then Shadiversity came in. I know Shadiversity is a very divisive figure in the history community. I watch him. I will. He did another response, and they pretty much just went through the mainstay they went through is in Vikings. The armor is off. I went really posh then. Is really, really awful. What would your thoughts be on that?
You're cutting out a little bit.
Where did I cut out?
Did you say in the show the armor is awful?
Yeah. What's your thoughts on the awful? Yeah, the awful armor.
So yeah, I mean, the armor in the Last Kingdom is also terrible. For all the heroes, at least.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing about medieval drama is, and I think the only reason I've begun to be a little bit more soft on Hollywood when it comes to this kind of thing is because I did start taking film classes and I did start writing scripts. And as I did that, I was like, oh yeah, this would be pretty hard to display on television while maintaining authenticity. So, for example, I wrote a pilot episode for a show about the Glendower Rising. And as I'm writing it, I'm like, oh man, as I'm trying to go through everything, I'm writing it and everything's described. It's so historically accurate in the first draft. I bring it to class and we read through it. And my teacher's like, well, where's all the mud and, dirt and grime and everything? And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, yeah, well, you've got him walking through this village street, but what makes it medieval? There's nothing about what makes it medieval. And I'm like, I mean, the thatched roofs and the way the windows are designed, I didn't go into it because there wasn't anything that made it medieval. It was just I said it's a medieval town. They looked a certain way. Why do I? And her whole point was oh well, it doesn't seem medieval enough. And I think that's what they're doing with armor and everything. If you notice throughout the seasons of the Last Kingdom, the armor that Uhtred and Finan and all of them wear changes considerably, which it never would have changed that much over the course of a single person's lifetime. In fact, the possibility that an Anglo-Saxon, even a warlord, even an earl, would have had that many different suits of armor is just no. You would have had these people. These are people who would get chainmail. Maybe, and chainmail was only then becoming and I know some other medievalist is going to be mad that I'm saying chainmail instead of mail, as if the average layperson knows the difference. But no, so the 5-ring linked chainmail that they wore, where you would have each link attached to 5 others, that style of armor began to popularize at this dawn of the Viking Age because the Vikings made the best kind. Someone else is probably also going to say, oh, why do you keep saying Viking? Viking was a profession, not a culture. It's like, okay, well, the lay person, the average person knows this period, knows these people as the Vikings. When we make content in this format, we're generally not making it for other academics. I just want to get that out of the way before anyone brings it up.
To be fair, I am one of those people who will be like, actually, they're not called Vikings. Even though I'm just a history buff, it's my one little gatekeepy thing I do. Mm-hmm. I mean, to be fair, in my Æthelflæd, which if I've timed this right, both parts should be out by now. By the time this goes up, the first part of that, I do spend a good 5 minutes just explaining the different terms between Viking. I'm fairly certain I got Viking and Viking wrong, because the term is going a Viking is actually raiding, isn't it? Because Viking is the profession, and then going a Viking is the term for raiding.
That was the verb. That was the action you were doing. To be a Viking was, but I believe the word in Norse still has the R at the end of it. Yeah. I don't know how to pronounce Old Norse properly at all. I won't pretend I do. But
to my knowledge, it's Vikinger, because I spent
think so, yeah,
better part of being 15, 16 sitting in front of a Norse translator listening to how it was done, because you could tell this. Yeah, I've had many relationships in my time.
I am the most active person.
Yes.
No, I feel you. I'm the same way. It's a hard life.
I mean, I learned to speak Doversal from Skyrim, so thing is, I've forgotten it all now. I used to be I could actually speak it fairly well, and now I can't do it. It was all wasted. But anyways,
it happens.
We've derailed again. To be fair, we can segue onto some more medieval bits now, because I think we've pretty much covered what we can with Æthelflæd, that she was the most influential person in the formation of England. But what
I just want to say, like, the before we move on, I do want to clarify, like, this is a Joan of Arc figure.
Yeah, well, better, because she's English, not French.
Yeah, but that's my point, is, like, what you hear about Joan of Arc was probably a schizophrenic girl, who happened to get a lot of things right. But
the French are now
that's going to be controversial.
Yeah, the entirety of France is now going to try and cancel.
Yeah, exactly.
They treat Joan of Arc like a hero.
There's one of two possibilities. Either God broke a 1,400-year rule of not speaking directly to human beings, or
he really hated the English.
Joan of Arc had schizophrenia.
Yeah,
but
Joan of Arc is like.
But her description, she is described as somebody who, in the modern sense, probably would have been diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Oh yeah.
But whether it was God's voice in her ear or not, she would absolutely have been diagnosed with schizophrenia. But if the whole story with her, that she led the French army and everything, it's very embellished over the years. But she was an important figure. She was a rallying cry. But Æthelflæd as a figure actually did lead armies and did strategize and did go point for point with the other men. Like this is a character who really did break gender roles and
she was
did
like
break
at
gender
the front
stereotypes.
Of like particular army she led. She was leading quite literally from the front.
She operated in the same way as any king or lord would have.
I think wasn't the Battle of Chester. She did actually. Her strategy in the Battle of Chester was stunning, where she just lured the Norse and the Danes in, and then, not only that, she went, which I find when I actually talk about this, I'm gonna be laughing, because she went to the Irish and said, "What quarrel do the Anglo-Saxons and the Irish have?" And I was like, foreshadowing.
At the time, though, it's a decent question.
Yeah,
at the time, it's a very valid question.
Oh yeah, at the time,
within 400 years. Not so valid.
Which this is where we will do our first little segue, because this is my biggest gripe. When I was studying for Cromwell and when I did Grace O'Malley or Granny Meowl, as I think I've pronounced that correctly, I was looking at the actual connection of English colonisation of Ireland, and I recently watched your How Did the English Colonise Conquer the Irish. The thing that threw me was Anglo Irish was becoming a thing, and the two cultures were sort of mixing. And then Henry VIII comes along and goes, "Nah, I think what we'll do is we need to Anglicise the Irish because the English over there are becoming too Irish." And the history of England and Ireland probably would have been like, oh yeah, we fought for a bit, but now, it's not. It'd be a bit more like Scotland, because I always have the running joke, and I don't do it on TikTok because I know I will get cancelled. It was like the Welsh and the Irish hate the English, and the Scottish will banter with the English because in history the Scottish normally won.
There's also they did a the English did a much
is over now.
Yeah, the English did a much better job of integrating with Scotland than they did with Wales or Ireland. The Scottish, they're, and I think it's because they learned. Honestly, I honestly think it's because they learned with the introduction of the Statute of Rhuddlan in 1284. They made Wales the personal domain of the King of England.
Yes, that was...
Bad move. They also made the English crown prince the Prince of Wales.
Yeah.
The Welsh didn't use the term king all that often at the time. They would here and there, but they preferred prince.
Yeah.
Which went back to their history with Rome. That was a very ancient thing for them. But the Archie would be the High King of Wales, but that would usually be an elected position in times of war when you needed to gather together the entire army to fight something, usually the English. So with England, with Wales, they made it the personal domain of the king, and then he would give out these marcher lordship regions, and they basically focused on southern Wales because they thought, oh, this is where all of the fertile land is, this is where all of their ports are, this is the stuff we really need to control. Didn't really consider the fact that not trying to integrate the North at all was going to lead to a very angry Northern Wales. So, and that leads to eventually, the rebellion of Owen Glendower and I know I'm not pronouncing that the way the Welsh do, but
did you know it was the Welsh that actually got Henry Tudor on the throne? Henry VII.
Yeah.
That when I learnt that, my jaw dropped. Given the fact that the Tudors were gone. Yeah.
His name is Welsh. Tudor.
Really? Tudor's Welsh?
Yeah. So that it's anglicized, but it's really like Francicized. But Tudor comes from Tudor, which is Tewder, and it's a North Welsh family from Gwynedd.
No way. I mean, okay, that makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah, well, because Tudor's a name, and I don't know if it's direct connection. I don't think it is. But during the Glendower Rising, two of Owen Glendower's cousins were Tudors. But back then, it was still the naming convention was still patronymial. They were like Ap Tudor. But there were two of them who basically were the lords of Anglesey, and they went and while Owen was dealing with that southeastern march, they went and took Chester. So there was this huge people don't, and I talked to Welsh people about this, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I mean I've heard the name." I was like, "You're not aware of who this person was and what he accomplished?" But yeah, so with Wales, it was that the Statute of Rhuddlan, and then after the rebellion of Owen Glendower, just the absolute massacre the English committed, burning churches, slaughtering civilians, burning farms. Just this kind of march through Wales where they just desecrated everything. And then in Ireland, 100 years later, you get the Statute of Kilkenny, which did much the same thing. It made it so that the Irish could not own land in the Pale. The Irish could not own land in England. The Irish could not speak Irish. The Irish could not, practice their own version of Christianity. They had to follow the English bishops. So England basically went in and with those two countries, with those two cultures, tried to erase them. With Scotland, there definitely were some attempts at cultural genocide, but they married into Scottish families.
Cromwell,
they treated the Scots much more like people, where they treated the Welsh and the Irish like savages.
I think a big chunk of that comes less from because the main reason the British Empire ultimately fell wasn't to theirs, because unlike Rome would integrate and it would mix cultures. It would mix Roman with, that's why you have Romano-Celtic, you have Greco-Roman, all that stuff, all that sort of stuff. We turned around, we went, we need to make everyone British. or English, and that was our major problem. And the reason that I think, from my perspective, it didn't happen with Scotland is because the way Scotland came in. So obviously it was through debt eventually, but you had James the First and Fifth, and then you had Charles, and obviously because it was a Scottish ruling family, Scotland was just sort of left to do its own thing because they were Scottish, and it becomes like, I mean, whenever I bring this up around some of my Scottish friends, they do get quite annoyed because I'm like, so technically you could say the Scottish ruled the world and it's all their fault, all the bad stuff we did. I do kid to my Scottish viewers. Yeah, I do kid to my Scottish viewers before you all dislike bomb the video. Not that that's any use anymore on YouTube.
That still hurts you in the algorithm.
Oh yeah. No, did you know dislikes actually don't knock you down because it's interaction? Really? It's because it's interaction. It still pushes you up. I don't know if that's the same, and they might have changed it, but because it counts interaction, the algorithm doesn't figure it out because it's an AI. Yeah, and AIs aren't that smart yet. True. Thankfully.
No, they're not. Oh my god, they're horrible. But I do want to. You said something very prescient in there, which is that the intermarriage and the cultural exchange between the two, and how the Scottish sort of like they became kings of England and the English became kings of the Scottish, and there was this back and forth that never happened with Ireland or Wales, and it could also be because Ireland and Wales didn't really have functioning national monarchies at the time. Ireland really never had a functioning national monarchy.
They came close, though.
With Wales, there were a couple of times where it was close. They got close with Brian Boru, but Brian Boru's line only lasted until the end of the century when the English came in.
Yeah.
Which is ironic, because by the time the English came in, the English had actually been conquered like 3 times in that century.
Yeah.
Before they finally went and invaded Ireland. But
we was like, it's our turn now. We want to do.
Yeah, I think Richard Strongbow was like, you know what, this is kind of volatile. I'm going to go conquer the Irish. But what doesn't get talked about in a lot of these cases, when you look at the places that were immediately brought into the English kingdom from Ireland and Scotland, those are places where the leadership primarily, and again, this is the ones that integrated the most, not necessarily the ones that were the most important or the biggest, but the ones that were the quickest to integrate were the places that were Hiberno-Norse. So it was Dublin, Waterford, Wexford. It was all these Viking colonies.
Which makes sense.
Because the Viking culture was so much more similar to the English culture than it was to the Irish culture.
Because I think, like, as time went on, I think Dane and Norse culture became so much stronger than even Anglo-Saxon culture was. Like as you end towards, by the time the Normans show up, we're not Anglo-Saxon anymore. The term doesn't really apply. That's why Anglo-Norman becomes a term, which is where my favourite part of Robert the Bruce comes from, because the Anglo-Norman, the Scottish the ruler of Scotland at the time, whose name passes my brain, allowed a load of Anglo-Norman lords to settle in the southern part of Scotland, because the idea was Anglo-Norman lords won't attack other Anglo-Norman lords, and
I think it was Malcolm Canmore for some reason.
Perhaps it would have been. Well, it would have been just probably the reign of Henry the First. Yeah, William, Henry, Stephen. Yeah, Henry the First would have been around.
Henry the First.
And yes, to everyone listening, I did just do the Merry Monarch song to get that in my head. Do you have anything like that? We have a thing called Horrible Histories, and in the UK, if I need to remember the English kings, you just sing the Merry Monarch song. So it's like William, Henry, Stephen, Edward, Richard, John. I
don't think I have that. No. Oh, I was thinking Donald Bain.
It would have been around either William
successor to Malcolm Canmore.
Yeah, it would have been around the time of William II or Henry the First.
Yeah, it would have been either Malcolm Canmore or Donald III. Because Canmore was 1066 and Donald was 1093. So it would have been one of the two of them.
So what happened was they brought in the Anglo-Norman lords. However, that particular lineage, led to Robert the Bruce, who also married an Anglo Irish, the daughter of an Anglo Irish lord. But my favourite part of that is he would then attack his father-in-law eventually when he tried to put his brother on the throne of Ireland. which is a very interesting story, which I will, well, at some point I will get into more. I will study a bit better. But I will ask you here now, because I'm hoping you know a bit more about it than I do. But my favourite joke with that is that it took an Englishman to liberate Scotland from the English. But because Robert the Bruce did have a little bit of Anglo-Norman in him, which is interesting. But I don't like now that the culture is typical 21st century culture. It's people, I saw a news article where it was like, we need to stop idolising Robert the Bruce because he wasn't. And here on I was like, he lived like,
because he probably would have been racist. Like what?
Yeah. No, I think the article was about his sexism or something. And it was like
it was 14th century Scotland.
we like it's applying the logic of the modern day onto historical figures really bugs me.
Exactly.
Especially Robert the Bruce, because I won't judge Robert. I will come at Joan of Arc. I will come at Napoleon. I will come at all
I'm
these
noticing
figures.
a trend about who you'll come at.
Oh yeah.
And their country of origin.
I love the French.
Don't get me wrong. I do this all the time with Ohio. You're fine.
Yeah.
Half of my videos, there's some snarky dig at Ohio in there somewhere. I called France the Ohio of Europe.
Do you know what? The France stuff.
I have no fear.
I genuinely have no malice towards France. The only reason I do it is because the Napoleon fanboys get so aggressively upset when you dig. Like I won't actually come for Joan of Arc. You're okay? Have you lost? Is Archie gonna?
I've lost my dog. I'm trying to figure out where he went.
But.
Okay, he's back.
It's fine.
He was sleeping under a different table.
Oh, okay. It's fine. But this bit I will edit out, unlike the Mongolian bit from last episode. Because people are like, why are we randomly watching a dog disappear? I feel like you should have like a show just dedicated to Archie.
We've thought about having an Archie Cam.
I would love just an Archie Cam.
If we had the money, we would set it up.
Yeah. But that's next time, everyone, when this goes up, it'll be on a Friday, so the next day will be a Saturday. So make sure you go and watch the Law Lounge and donate for Archie Cam.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. I want everyone to, all of the super chats just have to say, I'm going to have to leave it in now, so it makes sense. Yeah.
You won't come for Joan of Arc.
Yeah. Yeah, but hey, yeah, that was it. Yeah, see, one day I will stay on topic. But yeah, I won't come for Joan of Arc because she is such a national treasure in France, and I think there would be people come from France to hurt me. Mm-hmm. Even though the French betrayed Joan of Arc, which is my interesting, like, we did mildly burn her alive, sorry about that. But we wouldn't have been able to if the French king didn't go, no, you're good. You can go live with the English in prison now, because we gave him the opportunity, we gave the chance, we gave the ransom. He just wasn't up for it. But Napoleon I think is fair game, because one, it's arguable if he is actually French, which is
Corsican.
Yeah,
bold hot take here. Napoleon is an Italian hero.
Oh, I was about to make that as a joke, and you said that with your full chest. I was going to jokingly say, and you went.
I'll say several things. Napoleon's an Italian hero, and so is Christopher Columbus.
Oh no, I think everyone except no one wants to claim Christopher Columbus anymore. He's sort of
no.
I don't know if it's the same in America.
People don't realize that the reason that Christopher Columbus has a holiday in the United States has nothing to do with him discovering America, and everything to do with him being the most prominent Italian figure for Italian Americans.
Wasn't it to actually end racism towards Italians in America?
Yes, it was a play to make Italians feel more included because there was such a huge Italian immigrant population.
Which is, it's a smart play, and now, obviously, again, because we look back with our modern day, that we, like, I don't, obviously, I'm not going to go into politics, because everyone's here for laughter, and the laughter, and
no politics.
Yeah, no politics. If you want to see my politics, I go on other people's political live streams where I talk about it.
Yeah, that's the only time I'll ever talk about it is on other people's shows.
Or unless it's politics from, like, ancient Greece, because that is insane. Yeah. We will cover briefly a bit about ancient Greece, but I want to stick mainly to medieval stuff.
You ever refer to the Sacred Band of Thebes as the Sacred Band of Butt Buddies?
No. haven't done that before. I get a lot of trouble with my Alexander the Great stuff. Okay, we're going into ancient Greece, so that. With my Alexander the Great stuff, I've tried taking all, because it's such. I don't know why it's such a big debate, but his sexuality is like if you say that if you went to the Balkans now and you said any one of like either he's straight, bi, or gay, you will get 3 different groups of people screaming at you and I'm like, normally the Alexander was gay crowd is mostly Americans who put that forward, but I've not seen any evidence for that. The bi stuff is
there's no evidence he was gay.
Yeah, there's evidence he was bi. There's like very little. Like I do think I don't see. This is given how my accounts come up. This is going to be a very controversial thing for me to say. I don't think he had a relationship with Æthelflæd.
There's no evidence that he did.
Yeah,
that's the thing, and it's like you're looking back 2,400 years.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like now in the cultural context of Greece.
In the
cultural context of Greece, it's entirely possible.
Yeah.
Like I say something that gets me in hot water sometimes, but like Greece was culturally homosexual. Like
that's a controversial thing to say in modern.
I'm not saying it's I'm not saying it's a negative thing, but like in the modern perception of homosexuality is very much that it's like you're born gay.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, in the ancient world,
it was very different.
It was a cultural thing. Like in Athens, you had to fuck guys. Like that was the only way to get ahead.
The thing a lot of people... Oh, my throat. Can't make the frogs leave in my throat. There we go. The thing a lot of people get wrong with ancient Greece is homosexuality was okay as long as you were the top. Because that was the masculine position. And
you were expected to like be the bottom, though, as a young man. That's what's so weird about it.
Because you were seen as on the same footing as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it gets such misogyny. The Greeks invented misogynistic homosexuality.
Well, it could be argued. It could be argued homosexuality. It could be argued homosexuality is the most misogynistic thing of all. We're literally like, no women.
Good God, you're allowed to make that joke.
Yep.
I'm just gonna laugh at it.
To be fair, it's not even a bad joke. We're talking about people that have been dead for 2,400 years. Like, yeah. If they're mad at us, then they can haunt us and they can let us know. Which we will get onto some hauntings very briefly, because I know obviously I think you've got the Law Lounge tonight, so I don't want to keep you the whole day.
Got time.
I know that's why I did it so early, because I knew us combined would not shut up.
Yeah, probably.
Where was I going with this? That was it, Alexander. I do believe fully that he loved Roxana. I don't think he actually cared about his other 2 wives. Like, and that's what draws me away from because I've backtracked on it a lot, because a lot of my early sort of starting on socials was joking about him and Hephaestion, whereas I've pulled that back so much. Because when I've actually looked at it and I've, stopped going on the cringe internet side where it's like, oh, the historians just won't accept that they were clearly like together.
And they were roommates.
Yeah. I mean, that does work for some places like Hadrian and what was his name? Because it was actually confirmed they were lovers because Hadrian hated his wife.
I don't recall much about Hadrian, but one who I did think is interesting, I've seen this crop up in the past year, I had never heard it before 2022 or 2021, was that Caesar was bisexual. And I went in and I looked at it and I was like, where did this come from? Where's this from? And what I found was that it mostly stems from an account written by one of his political rivals, who referred to him as every woman's man and every man's woman. But that's it, people take that and they're like, oh, that's that shows that he was like widely known, because this account was written in around Trebizond, so northern modern Turkey. And they're like, oh well, if it was being written that far from Rome and Caesar primarily campaigned in the West in Spain and Gaul, then it must have been. No, when he was a young man, he did spend some time working as
the court of the king of Bithynia.
Yeah,
Nicomedes.
Exactly. So. Yeah, exactly. You got the name and everything. Jeez, look at you.
Because you know.
So yeah, during that time, that's when it was written. It wasn't written because he was so widely known to be, promiscuous. It was because he was right there and he got in a tussle with another dude.
Yeah. The thing was that there was a song. Al-Kabadi's Histories covered this. He actually had the song, but I can never remember it. I can't. The lyrics are obviously in Latin, so you have to translate them. There is a translation available on the internet, but can't be asked to find that right now. But the thing for me is, again, I was also on that train of like, look, yes, gay queen, look at how LGBT representation in history, and then I looked at it and I was like, no, this was because the thing that made me twig that it probably was a bit fictitious was because he was on the bottom, and that, obviously that being a derogatory place, I immediately went, oh yeah, no, someone's trying to mug him off.
That's the thing, is like you got to look into the context, and I see this a lot on the internet today. People who will take one little bit, one hint,
get excited,
and just run with it historically.
Yes.
The one I saw the most recently was Easter, where people are like, "Did you know that Easter was actually originally a pagan holiday, and it's called Easter because it was a celebration of the German goddess of the dawn?" And I did like cursory digging into it, and it's just not like this. Because at first, for me, as somebody who went to school for medieval history and got a minor in religious studies where I focused on Judaism and Christianity, I feel qualified to speak on this.
Quite literally the most qualified person to speak on it.
There is mention of a German goddess known as Estre, who was, and this mention is made by Bede, and his reasoning is he says that Estremanath, which is the German word for April at the time, basically, is named after the goddess Estre, and that this was a celebration of the spring and rejuvenation and fertility, and it just so happened to work really well with Easter. And people ran with that, and they were like, see, well, even Christians were writing about it back then. So that means that Christians took the holiday from the pagans and just erased all documentation of it. And it's like, no, go and look at the word in the languages that had the holiday earlier than the Germans. It's Pascha or Pasqua or something like that. It's all based on Paschal, which is Hebrew. It's Passover. That's where the name comes from. And so, you dig into that and you tell people that, and they're just so insistent. They're like, no, it's because the Christians destroyed all the documentation. No, it's not. It's because the only reason we even have a remote belief that there was possibly a goddess known as Estra is because of Christians who wrote it down. There's this weird, like, anti-Christianity thing because, there were some Christian groups who did some really bad stuff. But, like, you gotta be precise with this stuff, because if you're not, someone like me is going to come along and totally debunk it, and then where does that leave you?
I think it's because, again, it's looking back with a mod. I'm being so careful how I word this so no one goes, aha, he's one of those political people.
It's applying modern ideas and terminology to something that doesn't reflect it.
Throughout history, Christianity has been an oppressive force in places, but you have to remember that they were also themselves, like the first Christians were also heavily oppressed. I had a point with that going in, but it's just, that was it. It's the same as looking back at the British Empire, and it's something I get done. I don't criticise the British Empire enough, which is why I don't talk about it on TikTok at all, because that. It's on YouTube. It's okay. If you've come in, we've been recording for close to an hour now. If you've come in close to an hour and you've heard me say about British Empire and now you're offended, I'm impressed by that. That is dedication to being offended. But I'm not going to put it on TikTok. But
he's been very pro-British this whole time.
Yeah. No, I'm not. I love the French. Oui, révolution.
Je m'appelle croissant.
To point the accents. But I actually got away with. Did you see my video I did on? I think it was 1977 France when they did something very suspicious. I
did not see the video.
I think it was 1977. That might be the wrong date. Hang on, let me double check. But basically, what happened was they there was a group of French philosophers and great thinkers. I think it was French Protest 1977, who wanted to remove the age of consent in France. And I did a joke about it, and I was like, why do the French never talk about French Petition 1977? That's it. Yeah. With Michel Foucault, Jean Danet, and Guy Haneke. I can't remember. That's from Wikipedia, so I probably shouldn't be quoting that. You need easier names, France. French? I didn't even say France there. Did you? In French, it's called the France as well.
Le France.
That's why the English and the French hate each other, is because we're as pompous as each other. That's the.
You hit the nail on the head there, bud.
We are quite literally two sides of the same coin.
I like listening. I want to do a show where we just take a guy from Alberta and a guy from Alabama, and we just have them talk about things, because the variance in how English can be spoken.
Isn't there like a random place in America where it's like still got a really strong English accent? It's not even in New England, is it? It's there's a random spot in America where they have like they're meant to speak like the original 13 colonists did. I don't know where it is.
There's so many. Okay, so here, oh boy. So the belief among some linguists is that the southern, like Dixie accent, like Georgia, that is what English sounded like when it came to the US, because the people who maintained that accent this whole time, going back to the 1600s, were the upper class.
What, so like the lower... howdy there, boy, I'm from deep south. Like that sort of accent was the idea of original English.
Not even necessarily that. There's a... it's not quite like a Savannah accent. You get a little bit more like this. There's a great example of it on The Office where it's like slow molasses. But that kind of like, when you're down there, you're talking more like this. And this is kind of the deep southern accent that you run into. Whereas this is more of the Texas accent. It's a little bit more of the top of your mouth. And it's not quite as back here.
It's good to be someone.
And then when you get up to New England, and
you do the accents as well. No one else can do my range of accents.
American. But then there's this wide variance, and like up in New England, like Boston, you go now, you talking about like you're running into somebody is 60, 70 degrees. You ask them if maybe they should be wearing shorts, something like that, and then that melds as you get a little bit further south into the more the Long Island accent, and as you get a little bit further west, you're down into Brooklyn. You're talking more like this, what you doing? I'm walking here, it's like kind of Brooklyn, Staten Island, Philadelphia. You got Philly's a little bit weird, kind of, it's very much the standard American accent, but then you toss in something like I'm having a glass of water, or I'm going to see the Eagles play, something like that. Gets kind of into a Delco accent, a little bit more like this, as it goaded, it's like this. And then you get up to Chester County where we talk like me. But if you just kind of trace that going down from Boston through like New York, Long Island, Brooklyn, Jersey, Philly, Delco, Chester County, that's not a very big area. That's maybe 200 miles.
See, we have a similar thing, except with English, with English, Welsh, Scottish, and Irish accents. I can travel 5 miles down the road and they will speak entirely different. Like if I take like a 2-hour drive down to Cornwall, we'd understand each other, but the dialect is going to be drastically different. Even inside Essex, which is as much information as I'll ever give out, because otherwise I'll dox myself. Even inside Essex, there's like at least 3 different sets of accents. In like we have the same thing as America. It's just squished down. Like you in the UK, I think the last survey there was close to like 150 to 300 accents. But that's purely because we were conquering and being conquered.
There's another aspect that the English have that that Americans and Canadians don't have nearly as much of.
Yes, that
and
ability
it's
to sell aluminium properly.
It's aluminum. But we never had the rigid class structure that England had.
Really?
So no, So there was an upper class and a middle class and a lower class, but it was, by the time you got here, it had much less to do with your ancestry and your who you were related to,
and
more to do with your economic social status. So if you were, and this is the way it remains today in America, if you were born dirt poor, but you struck it rich, like, say you were born dirt poor, you went and you served aboard a merchant ship for 5 years, came home, bought some land, there happened to be a gold mine on that land,
happy days.
You were upper class. It didn't matter where you came from. You were upper class now. And, you can make all the jokes you want about capitalism, but, like, America's class system is based on capitalism entirely. It has nothing to do with where you came from, what you looked like, who you knew, who you were related to.
Well,
for the most part, yeah. But there were certainly people who, for the first slave owner in the U.S. was black.
What?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. I know that there was
the first man to legally own a slave, enslave someone in the United States, was a black man. And obviously that is not to discount the horrors of chattel slavery. It's just to say, like, when I say that your position in society in America is entirely related to wealth and nothing else, I mean that. But there's certainly, if you're black, there are a lot of times that it's going to be hard to get yourself taken seriously in the U.S. Hispanic as well. The range of what is considered, like, I don't want to say white, but what's considered, like, I guess first class versus second class is broadening significantly in the U.S., which is something we need to work on. We should get rid of any racial barriers to class.
Definitely.
But we don't see the class struggle in the same way as a lot of other countries, and I think this is why Marxism has such a difficult time taking root in the United States as opposed to Europe.
Yeah.
Europe for a very long time has always had classes. They grew out of the feudal system. The United States started with mercantilism. So at the very beginning, we were money. Everything in the US was money. Jamestown, money. Roanoke, money. Philadelphia, money.
The
whole way.
One of my favorite bits. Like, I keep saying I don't know that much about American history, then bringing out a load of stuff about American history.
You know a lot more than most British people. I'll say that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I know, but it's mainly just because I didn't have friends growing up, so I just gorge on documentaries. But I think the pinnacle of, like, saying, like, how America is built on money is when you rolled up to Japan and went, trade with us, we're going to blow you up. And I mean, you eventually got round to the blowing up, but like, that's fine. All two of my Japanese.
Took us a little while.
Yeah, it took you a little while, but I've forgotten the name. You probably know the name of the captain that did it, but that is like, you quite literally was like, we're not here to do anything else. All we want is for you to trade for us and only us. And I think, like, when I read on it, it's because it was an arms race between the Americans, the Portuguese, and the British, because we all wanted trade with Japan. I mean, technically, the British won out because the Dutch were there forever. The Dutch were already trading with Japanese because they had, like, the sole rights to certain spots. But eventually, we would win out, which leads me on to my. I know it's technically a tangent, but it does lead me on to my favourite time that World War I nearly started, which is a weird sentence to say, but because the British were staunchly allies of Japan, and the French were staunch allies of Russia at the time, because they were allied in fear of Germany, and obviously when Japan and Russia went to war, Japan turned around to Britain and were like, you gonna do anything? And then Russia turned around to France and were like, you gonna help us out, bud? And then both Britain and France looked at each other, signed a bit of paper, and were like, we refused to attack each other, which basically meant that they couldn't enter the war because they would have to fight each other, because the British and the French forces at the time knew it would have been mutually assured destruction, because the French army and the British army and the only thing we would beat the French on would be navy, which is why we eventually would enter World War One, because everyone's like, oh, it was to defend Belgium. It wasn't. It was because we wanted to knock out the German naval force because they were trying to challenge us navally. And the one thing we don't like in the world is being challenged navally, even though I think...
Which is funny, because you guys are no longer the dominant navy by any stretch of the word.
Even though if Boris lasts much longer, we won't talk about that.
I don't have any idea what's going on with that.
I'll talk to you off camera. I'll tell you that off camera. Because I will. It's like you said on the podcast the other day. If you say anything political, even if I don't take a side in that, I will lose half my audience.
Yep. That's what I always tell people is like, if you cancel me, I'm just going to become a political account and go after whatever side didn't cancel me. Doesn't matter. I have no allegiance but to chaos.
Yeah. Chaos. The only thing that's why I annoy people, because I always go, I'm middleman. I allow everyone's opinions. The only time I actually cause chaos and get involved. Anyway, actually no. Before I do that tangent, we'll finish off the actual train of thought. The Boris was trying to make us more of a naval power again, but I think it's pointless now because the current worry is America losing its naval supremacy to China. China.
That's a bit over exaggerated, by the way. They have one aircraft carrier and we have 11. Okay, and so we're building like a 12th.
Every time I go onto YouTube now, it's like China building new aircraft carriers to rival the US.
Yeah, because they need to sell you on the article, so you'll read it and click on an ad inside of it. It's the current geopolitical state of the world. What I'm worried about is that China is going to use the war in Ukraine as a distraction. Yeah, and start cracking down on their neighbors.
The thing is, if China, because I'm fairly certain, I know we've got a pact with Taiwan. I'm fairly certain you guys got a pact with Taiwan. That we would be obliged.
I believe we are obliged if China invades Taiwan to defend it. The question is, would our current government do that? And I don't think it would.
I don't think. I think. No, actually, no. We'll go on to this after.
Yeah, we'll talk about this later. But no. But yeah, with just to kind of like illustrate my point about this whole thing, John D. Rockefeller was not born a wealthy man. He just happened to get into the oil industry at the right time and became the wealthiest man in American history.
And then allegedly sank the Titanic.
Carnegie.
No, was it the Rockefeller? It was Rothschilds that allegedly sunk the Titanic.
Yeah, that's the Rothschilds.
Yeah. I don't support the conspiracy. Just Carnegie. Saying that it's a joke.
Carnegie was a Scottish immigrant. The Vanderbilts were not originally anywhere near the wealth they achieved. So in America, it was very much, if you can make money, you can become upper class.
There is a decent history of Scottish people coming over to North and South America and just causing absolute chaos. Like in South America, they all became generals, and in North America, they all became the rich upper class of America and Canada.
Yeah, well, and I think that goes back to exactly what we were saying earlier with the way that Scotland and England integrated.
Yeah,
the Scots have a very interesting history of being very much immersed in this English class system and understanding the workings of politics and
definitely
interclass relationships, but they also have a significant history of working very hard and being the underdog, being the oppressed people. Like they're in a very interesting, if precarious, middle ground position. Where back at that time, it makes a lot of sense that somebody who was raised in Scotland, especially upper class or middle upper class, would do well in a place like America, where the only thing that was tying you to your class was how much money you had and your ethnicity.
Yeah,
but I mean, there was, if you came over, because also you got to remember, if you came over to the U.S., there was a good chance nobody had your paperwork at that time.
Really?
You could be in the 1700s. Yeah, you could be anybody you wanted to be, because there wasn't really a national record keeping system yet. Like for example, I don't remember the exact date, but let me pull it up for you.
I know that there was a lot of record keeping jiggery pokery in the Civil War when the Irish were coming over to get away from us.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys. Again, all I keep doing is apologising for the British Empire in this episode.
So let me finish my point really quick.
Yeah, sorry.
In the U.S., so we have census records, right?
Yes.
That go back pretty far.
Yeah, same over here.
We have birth certificates and everything, but the likelihood that you could lose your birth certificate at some point back then, and you had the only copy, was pretty high. So, and granted, states did keep records and everything, but nothing was digitized. There was a chance something was lost. You could essentially say you were whoever you wanted to be until 1935. everyone in the United States knows about Social Security. We all have Social Security numbers. Every American has a serial number, which is kind of funny. That was instituted in 1935. We have been serialized for less than 100 years. Prior to that, you could forge a document, go to another state, and what are they going to say about it? Oklahoma is not going to write back to New York to ask if you are who you say you are. Now they can.
Ohio just doesn't do anything. I don't get the Ohio meme. You're gonna have to, because I can understand the French meme, and I was going to ask you about the Ohio meme, because when I asked you on Twitter, your answer was Ohio is the meme, and I was like, this doesn't answer my question.
Just to give you the really brief version of it, Penn State University, my alma mater, one of our biggest rivals is Ohio State University.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
And then the other thing about Pennsylvania and Ohio is they're very similar states in every single way. Western Pennsylvania is very much Midwestern. Ohio is Midwestern.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania has Lancaster County, which is all Pennsylvania Dutch Amish people from Germany, like still speak a version of German. They ride horses and buggies down highways. It's really funny. You have the exact same thing in Lancaster County, Ohio. So just if you took Pennsylvania, moved it west, and made it flat, it would be Ohio. So my joke running along is basically like, Pennsylvania is just better Ohio. Because we've got big cities, we've got mountains, we've got, like Ohio does have a sliver of it that's Appalachia.
There is some, I've noticed, obviously, like in the early 2010s, there was the famous American girl who was like, we don't need to speak all these different languages, people. We just need Americanish. And like, she was the big viral person in the UK, and that was that was how Americans were perceived. Like, everyone you asked.
I'm pretty sure that was satire. But it might not.
She came out later. Like, she does do comedy stuff now, so I'm fairly certain she was joking. She was like, she did one video where she was talking about England being a different planet. However, now I've noticed, I don't know if you've seen her videos, but there's a girl on TikTok now who all of her videos, like I was scrolling down, she was like, oh wow, Italy has mountains? Oh my god, Greece has mountains? And I was like, most of Europe is mountains. And I was like, but it was when she said Greece and Italy, I was like, Greece and like Italy are famous for their mountains. Like Greece, it's Italy less so. Greece is like made of mountains. It's to the point where I've had historians that I've been listening to turn around and say, we don't know why in whatever period they first came to Greece, someone went, yeah, I'll settle down here. Because it doesn't make sense physically in the story of human survival, settling in Greece doesn't, literally someone must have gone, you know what? F this. I'm settling down here.
So the version I heard, which I think is compelling, is that the first Greeks, the first Mycenaeans, did not come to Greece through Europe. They came through Asia Minor or Crete or Egypt and sailed there, which meant that they were probably accustomed to eating fish and olives and things like that. So for them, they just needed land for wheat
fishing,
or barley. And then they could fish and they could, you can grow livestock in mountainous terrain, especially goats. And we know that goats are a big part of Greek cuisine.
Yeah.
So it makes sense if the Greeks come from across the sea, and then the belief is that the first Greeks came from there, and then the next Greeks were I think the Doric people, who did come from Europe, who came down, and through interacting with the Mycenaeans, created trade networks and settled in Illyria and Thessaloniki and Macedonia. And that the reason that there's inhabited parts of Greece between the coasts and Illyria, Macedonia, is just because people set up colonies along those trade routes.
Yeah.
And eventually you ended up with all these like cities that really don't need to be there. There's no reason that's there. But it's the same thing that happened in the United States as we moved west, as we built out highways and stuff. You got towns every 50 miles that are just along the road that really don't have any reason to be there. I mean, why is Phoenix a city? Phoenix, Arizona should not be. There is no water. There is no arable land. It's in the middle of a desert and it's 110 degrees. Why are you there?
I think that just is just the American slogan is just, you know what? While we're here,
Phoenix is a testament to human will. As is Las Vegas. Like, those two cities are only there because you needed something there in order to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, you had to have a pit stop.
Yeah, you needed a pit stop. So that's why the US has all these random cities everywhere that really have no geographic reason to be there other than people were trying to get somewhere else.
But isn't it in those sort of places that the and you probably know I was going to bring up at some point that the UFO culture sort of virgin, because there's actually when I was like I used to be real I was into UFOs more than I was in history and folklore and anything. Like, there's records of UFO sightings in America, especially going back like to the first like colonists, and there's stories if you look in Native American culture that a lot of people attribute to folklore that when you look at it, I'm gonna sound like the History Channel now, are quite clearly UFO sightings.
Yeah, there's a few interesting things, and now we're getting into my wheelhouse. This is fun.
Yeah,
which is weird because we've been in my wheelhouse the whole time.
Yeah, I specifically made this medieval and folklore for your wheelhouse.
And we're on UFOs. Oh,
yeah.
Boy. So
do you know much about UFOs? Is that much of like the stuff, or are you more folklore and history?
It's mostly because I grew up in the US. So that's most of why I know about UFO. It's just so big culturally, and also Blink-182 is one of my favorite bands. And Tom DeLonge is the UFO guy.
Yeah,
like literally, he's the UFO guy. There's a really funny video. He went on Joe Rogan's podcast a few years back, and Joe's just like almost just blatantly laughing at him, like, this is ridiculous. And then everything Tom said, the Pentagon comes out in 2017 and is like, yeah, so UFOs.
We have a guy in the UK called Nick Pope, who's like our UFO guy, who
I've heard of him,
allegedly works with the government, knows all about all of our super secret weapons we're going to unleash if World War III ever takes off. But no,
that's exactly it. That is exactly it. Those UFO sightings just spike after nuclear weapons testing starts.
Yeah.
And I think if there is a catalyst for extraterrestrial intervention, and I'm not saying I believe in it, but I'm saying if there were to be something that would kind of be the domino that needs to fall for aliens to contact us, it would probably be the advent of nuclear weaponry. Yeah. And probably because, like, let's think about it. If there is an alien society out there that has reached the point where they can travel through space, they probably had their run through with nuclear weapons. Yeah. They probably experienced that. They probably did it.
There was a specific signal. I don't know the legitimacy of it. It was on a UFO documentary, so those are always 50-50. But we allegedly received a signal, and when it was translated, it was like it had the same rhythms of an SOS signal, where in Morse code it's like do 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 do, like where it's just like it's very clearly someone needs help. But the theory was that they had like nuked themselves, and obviously the signal would come out to help them, and obviously it was millions of years or thousands of years by the time it got to us, and that was the theory behind it. So I think if there was, like you say, a catalyst for the aliens to be like, oh no, like we need to make sure they don't go too haywire on it, it will be because if there is other cultures in the cosmos, they probably all looked at each other and gone, maybe we don't use nuclear weapons because Jeff and Jill are like very much like radioactive, playing Fallout IRL.
Exactly. I think it's got to be it. And then what I will say is the more recent UFO sightings, those all very much are like, okay, yeah, that's I can see how that would be a UFO, but we also might have the technology to do that kind of thing. Although some of them I'm like, all right, that's not human technology.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of, especially in the 80s and the 90s, a lot of the UFO sightings just turn out to be the specific bomber, the
B-2.
Like, that's the one, yeah.
Yeah, the B-2.
The one that they use in Skyline to blow up the aliens and it doesn't work.
The most interesting thing about all of this, in my opinion, though, is that a lot of these sightings come from the military. It's from jet fighter pilots who are like, something just whizzed past me at 700 miles an hour. I don't know where it came from. And then ground control's like, I don't know what to tell you.
And
there's, I do have, and I cannot pretend that I've seen this for myself. I do have a source who is a military contractor who claimed to me that he spent the night with a colonel, a female Army colonel, or Air Force colonel, who over Pillow Talk told him about how the Denver International Airport actually does house an underground Air Force base that is supposed to be like a secondary location to the more well-known bunkers that the president and our political class are supposed to go to in the event of nuclear war. And that all of this weirdness around the Denver International Airport is essentially trying to hide it in plain sight by making it so weird and so incomprehensible with all of this symbolism that people will just like go looking in all the wrong places and not realize the obvious. Which again, I can't confirm that, but that is what I've been told by people who claim to have that kind of intel. But then, if you go back to the descriptions of UFOs from Mayan writing and Zoroastrian and all this stuff that Ancient Aliens comes up with, and you cross-reference it with some of the descriptions of angels in the Bible, it matches very well. And in these cultures, they're describing their divine figures. As coming around in these, glowing golden chariots and things like that.
This is where we get taken down for misinformation. But no,
I'm not saying any of this is for sure. I'm just saying I noticed parallels between the description of angels as these glowing, interconnecting wheels of eyes. Think about if you're looking at that, if you're 3,000 years ago, and you're looking at that. How are you going to describe it?
I mean, that depends on your version, because obviously looking at proper biblical, I will try and save the Freemason stuff and that for last, and all the biblical stuff for last, because I do want to segue onto Skinwalker Ranch in a second, which is how we're going to move on to Sasquatch and that, which is my favourite thing of the US. But if you the problem with that is if you look at the proper the big spinning multiple eyes on fire, Archie.
He's making appearance.
Oh, he's shy. He's looking away from the camera. If you look at that, this is going to be the thumbnail, so I need you to look at the camera. Yeah, this is definitely thumbnail. This will get clicks.
Yeah. Oh, quiet.
Where was I going with this? But yeah, no, probably Brankles, but they've got the millions of eyes and they're on fire and stuff. Mm-hmm. How would you say that fits into it? Because that I don't see. I mean, unless they're very odd-looking aliens, but proper biblical angels because I was talking to one of my friends about it, and they was that they completely understand when people constantly when the angels say "be not afraid," because if you woke up one night and that turned up in your room to drop you an important message from God, you'd be like,
probably be afraid.
What are you? I'll probably have a heart attack and just go then and there. They probably started saying it because they just came every time they came back up. God just sitting there another one. There's only so many messengers I can put down.
Exactly, and I mean the brief answer is kind of they just that would be the spacecraft.
So you're saying the humanoids with the feathers and that would be the aliens and neither of us believe this, YouTube. We are just saying what ancient aliens would say.
That's the argument, is that that's the aliens were the beings inside it, and that wheel that you were seeing is actually the spacecraft itself, and that you just describing that 3,000 years ago is completely impossible in terms of what they understood. You got to remember, these are people who barely had iron.
Well, they'd had iron for a little bit, when Christianity came around.
I'm talking about Judaism.
Oh wow, you're going proper.
Yeah, I'm talking about Jewish descriptions of angels. And of course, you do get into the most vivid descriptions definitely do come with Revelation. In the 1st century AD, but that's kind of. Are you okay? Good. Okay. All right. He's like fussing until I try to let him down, and he doesn't want to go down.
He's
but yeah,
vibing.
he's just vibing. These descriptions, they a lot of the time I think they kind of match, and I'm definitely not an Ancient Aliens like truther. Like I don't believe in that stuff.
I used to be a long time ago, but
I'm a bit of a precursor society truther. I have a lot of questions about Atlantis.
Oh, okay.
I have a lot of questions about Atlantis.
Okay, we'll get on to Skinwalker in a minute. We're talking about this now. I'm not going to say it's a definite thing, but I think precursor societies. We've had modern, like actual civilization for about 5,000 years. We've been on the planet for as we are now, as Homo. Obviously, we've evolved a little bit and like adapted a little bit. But
about 100,000 years.
Yeah, 300,000.
Like,
300,000 years. You're telling me that we can build to this point, we can get to this point now where we're getting ready to colonize Mars in 5,000 years, but it took us, 250,000 years to get from chipping stones on a wall to the first civilization. That doesn't make sense to me. And there's probably archaeologists and that who could come in and go, well, actually, if you look at this little artifact and this layer of graphite, then it does make sense. But to what I know from my knowledge, I cannot fathom how we wouldn't have at least built one civilization like in that time, like one rose and fell. I mean, Assassin's Creed covers that perfectly.
So I wrote a movie about this. I wrote an entire movie about this concept. And my theory was that what wiped out that precursor civilization was the Great Flood that we hear about in all these different mythologies.
Interesting.
And the thing is, the version of it where the entire world is covered in water.
Yeah.
That doesn't appear to have happened.
No, I don't think it's physically possible, is it?
The entire world, as far as these people knew it,
would have,
which was within 100 miles of the coastline, that could have flooded.
Yeah.
So,
and it would only take 2 or 3 generations for the story to dissipate. Like, it wouldn't take that long.
Exactly. And so, what kind of you have to go back to here is Göbekli Tepe is, I think, the link, the important point, because it's about 11,500 years old.
Yeah. Isn't it the oldest structure we know of that we built?
Yep, it is the oldest man-made structure that we're aware of.
Yeah.
So, the confusing part with it is that, first of all, it does not appear to have been built for immediate functional use. It's not granaries, it's not windmills, it's not
they did
it's
find
not workshops.
Though. They found accommodation.
They did find accommodations. And it's in a circle. It's clearly a ritual. It's clearly a ceremonial site of some sort. This is something that has ritual ceremonial significance, probably religious significance. And it's perfectly north-south aligned. And what's fascinating about that is over the course of the 1,200 or so years that this site was active, the rings they built of these monuments rotate. So that they are always true north-south, astronomical north-south, not magnetic.
Do they naturally rotate?
They don't naturally rotate. They built out rings of these monuments over the course of 1,100, 1,200 years that as the Earth's axis changed position, they built it to continue matching the North Star.
How did they have that level of mathematics?
That's what's so confusing, because there's no agriculture there. There's no agriculture there.
Yeah.
And if there is, it doesn't predate Göbekli Tepe. The agriculture comes after Göbekli Tepe is built or during the building of Göbekli Tepe. From what we know, conventional archaeology, conventional anthropology, we don't believe that monumental architecture predates agriculture anywhere on Earth. The entire planet, monumental architecture is a step after agriculture. So how is it that this massive temple complex is built prior to the introduction of agriculture. Another thing, there are depictions of animal species and bird species that are not native to Turkey, which means that whoever built this had traveled considerably, had seen some stuff. There's stuff on there from Africa and Asia. So whoever built this, whoever carved these, must have seen these somewhere else. The human brain is not capable of creating images of things we haven't seen.
If you think about it, perhaps it was like that surviving generation trying to keep records of life before.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon me.
And here's another bit for you. The story of Noah's Ark. He takes two of every animal into the ark, right?
Yeah.
In the Zoroastrian cataclysm story, they do the same thing. It's not into an ark. They take animals underground. They take seeds underground.
This brings me on. I know where you're going with this. I know where you're going. Are you going to bring up the city? You're going to bring up... Oh, I know where you're going with this, aren't you? Yeah, you're going.
Part of it is I'm going to bring up the city in Cappadocia that is underground, but I'm going to bring up an even more important city historically and in terms of mythology. Atlantis.
If I know...
Ready for this?
Okay.
Atlantis sinks beneath the waves. In Plato's version, it's hubris that causes them to sink beneath the waves.
Yeah.
The dating of Göbekli Tepe is about 11,600 years ago. The dating of Meltwater Pulse 1b, the end of the Younger Dryas period, this immediate massive spike in global temperature that we have yet to account for. We don't know how it happened, but we do know it happened 11,600 years ago. And Plato's dating of the sinking of the lost city of Atlantis is 9,000 years before the time of Solon of Athens, who lived in 600 BC. 9,000 years before 600 BC is 11,600 years ago.
Okay.
How did Plato get the date right?
The thing I have an issue with Plato's story is he heard it from Socrates, who heard it from another guy, who heard it from another guy. So like
that's a rhetorical device.
Is it? So you would discount that because it?
I discount almost every single part of Plato's story, almost the entire story, except the date. The date is what sticks out to me because to me, what I get. If it works for you, it's your video.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Hey, it's only the second podcast, so I expected. Right, okay. So yeah, guys, if you're seeing this, is where because my my screen recording software, Stream Elements, has decided to remove the last hour and a half of what was a 2.5 hour podcast. So yeah, what if you've just?
We'll just do another one.
Yeah, we'll revisit this we'll revisit this again. Yeah, so you will have just seen Aidan prove his point about Atlantis. But now Aidan can quickly talk about anything you want to plug. Go on.
Thanks so much. So my name's Aidan Mattis. I'm host of the Lore Lodge on YouTube, and that's a YouTube channel where we talk about folklore, religion, history, and the paranormal. And then I'm the Aidan Mattis on just about everything else. If you search Aidan Mattis, you'll find me. That's about it.
Yeah, that's all groovy. It is recording. Wait, can you say something? I want to check the audio. Okay, it's recording the audio. I thought it wasn't recording the audio then. Stream Elements, if you could not cut out... to be fair, it's probably me. I've probably nudged the spacebar or something. That's probably what's happened. But we will come back again, because we was having a really good discussion about the England uprising. And, so maybe, I don't know, the focus of this was Æthelflæd, so maybe we'll just do a whole podcast focusing on him. But, yeah. Thank you for coming on. Apologies, we've lost all the footage. Some
is what it is.
Yeah,
all right.
Thanks
for having
me. Right, and see you later, everyone. Au revoir. Bye bye.